Hey everyone, I am T-Rex and today I am doing a different type of review as I'm going to be reviewing a comic book, and this is the comic run of Hawkeye by Matt Fraction and drawn by David Aja. So this is my first book / comic book review. Hopefully you guys like it. Now I will be reviewing this comic with my normal rating, but I will also be saying how easy it is for new comic book readers, as comics are kind of hard to get into. As a new comic book reader myself, I really want to be able to tell people if it's easy to read and the quality of the run itself. Now, in case you don't know, I am actually brand new to comics, so I want this to be my new series where I review full runs of comics that I read and tell you if they're good and how easy they are for new comic book readers to understand. Now, let's first explain how I am reviewing this. As you may know that with comics that the runs are different, so as Hawkeye goes, that's a series that has gone on for a long time, but there are a lot of different writers and artists on it. So I'm going to be reviewing the series when it was done by Matt Fraction and mostly colored by David Aja. So that is issue 1 through 22. So that is the run that I will be reviewing. So I hopefully cleared that up, and let's get started. So Hawkeye is a book about Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, who is a superhero that's an archer that is living in New York and once was an Avenger, and now he's just stopping the local crime in New York City. And first off, the story is not a big overarching story. I thought it was actually a very small scale story with Hawkeye, and for that it really worked. Also, the story, even though it isn't a huge storyline, I have to say the last issue was a perfect send-off to this run. The series perfectly crescendoed in a finale that made me stand up and go, dang, how are comics this good? Seriously, it nails that. Also, the writing is really fantastic. You got guys calling him Hawkeye, and no one really treats him like a real superhero. They just treat him like that nice guy who protects them in their apartment building. Now, since I'm new to comics, I'm trying to find writers that I really want to follow, but Matt Fraction, man, right now he's up there in writers that I really joined when I've started reading comics. I think the next run I want to read of his is his Iron Man runs, since that is by him, and Iron Man's like one of my favorite superheroes. But man, this guy knows how to write dialogue. I think he wrote Hawkeye amazingly. It sounds just like how I would imagine Hawkeye would talk, and I really liked it. He sounds just like him. I thought the dialogue was fantastic, and honestly, Matt Fraction, you did a great job when it came to the writing. Let's talk about the characters, and in this story, there are two main characters. You have Hawkeye Clint Barton, who's the normal Hawkeye you probably think of, and then there's the second Hawkeye, Kate Bishop. And I knew nothing about Kate Bishop, but she was really cool. She's this teenager who's also Hawkeye, but she felt really human, and they set her up very well, and it really felt like that blunt person in Clint Barton's life. And now when it comes to villains, I gotta say, it's fine. Nothing stands out in the story. This story definitely thrives on the main characters. These villains are okay. There's one really cool, interesting killer, but the tracksuit guys who are kind of the main villain of this story are really bland. There is actually, I just thought of one, Madame Mask. She was fine. When this story does not really revolve around their main villains, they really are just antagonists to make sure that Hawkeye keeps moving throughout this world and his stories keep being told. Not very important, and they're not very memorable, but I guess they do their job. I thought the villains were very lacking in this story. Also, I usually don't talk about art and stuff because that's not really me, but I want to say the art was done by David Aja. It feels very different than other comics that I've read, and I thought it really tells a story and gives the book a whole tone, and the book feels very different when it's not drawn by him. So I really thought David Aja had a great art in the book, and it really gave a tone and feel to the story. Next, pacing. For me with comics so far, I realized that these books rely heavily on pacing because it is upwards of 20 pages to 30 pages an issue, and this series is 22 issues, and now we got a pretty long run if you're adding up all those pages together. So we're going to need some good pacing in this, and for me the story flowed very well from the beginning, but then something happens in the middle point that grinds the story to a halt. This is non-spoilers, but Kate Bishop gets a new storyline, and I found it super long and tedious. Now this part of the book's about 5 issues, but they really struggled. This is during the middle of the 20 issues. It's kind of between 14 and issue 20. This is where it kind of really struggled, and I just thought I did not do well. I did not think that the arc is that great, but when the arc finishes up, they immediately hit the ground running again. They knew exactly where they were going. They started getting back on pace, and I think that was really good. I think they really knew where they were going in the beginning and end, but towards the middle, they kind of lost where they were going. Now, people who watch this might think that I'm being way too critical of the comic series, as it was very well received when it came out, and people claim it's one of the best comics in the last decade. But remember, I still enjoyed this. The book has these characters that you honestly love, getting in these situations that are super down to earth, with people that you feel like you might actually know in real life. The book, when it is at its best, is straight up amazing, but they still stumbled a bit. Does it make the overall story bad? No. But is the story a masterpiece? I'm gonna have to say no as well. Overall, I did have a very good time with Hawkeye, and you probably will too. Overall, I am going to say that Hawkeye by Matt Fraction and David Aja is great. Now, another question I wanted to answer, is this book good for new comic book readers? I'm going to say that Hawkeye is really easy to get into if you don't read comics. Please remember this is coming from a guy who has not really read comics that much at all. In this book, they don't really heavily rely on characters outside of characters that they set up explicitly. Now, when it was the villains, I knew none of them, but they set them up well, and all of the characters kind of made sense. I did not know any of these villains, and I didn't know Kate Bishop, but they set them up well enough that I figured out how they acted, and they did a good job explaining them. Also, when it comes back to lore, the first page solves it. Usually in comic books, it really struggles with having too much lore that really drags it down. But in the beginning, it just says, hey, I used to be an Avenger, I'm not now, let's get going, and really hits the ground running. It's really trying to get you into the character instantly, so if you haven't read a lot of comics like me and are nervous about the lore, it doesn't rely on it, and you should give Hawkeye a shot. It's really easy to understand. Now I have a question for you guys. What other Hawkeye comics should I read that you love and want me to read? I'd love to hear your recommendations, and would you like me to do more comic reviews? I would love to keep doing these if the interest is there. And honestly, if you want to, share this video with a friend. A friend wants to know if Hawkeye is good and if they should read it. Thank you for all of the support on the channel. If you want to see more from me, there's probably a video on my channel you will like. And if you want to see more from me in the future, you can subscribe and hang around. Anyways, next time I'll be reviewing my favorite trilogy of films, one by one at a time. But my next time, I will be reviewing Batman Begins. Hopefully that will come out next Tuesday. And when that comes out, I'll see you then. Bye.